this meeting.
Yep.
So since we have 3 committees, what we thought we would hopefully try to do is maybe we would be able to get one of those pure just committee meeting slots that you talked about, at least be on the list to first come, first serve, or however you described it. And
Yep.
then and then we would sort of, if we could get one of those in a month, then we would use an hour before this meeting for the other committee to meet. This way we would sort of be able to get.
Right now, what you've got access to is basically 6 hours in a month in 2 chunks.
Great.
And then how you split that up, entirely up to you and how
Perfect.
you advertise it.
So then we could do all of our like committee meetings in 1 3-hour block and then have a 2-hour meeting.
You could. Yep.
Okay. And then the other thing is we're hoping, and we, you don't have to tell me this now, we can check your schedule. We're hoping, since we're just a week off of getting back on our customary every first Tuesday of the month, we're hoping to start in December going back to that customary meeting date, which would be December 1st, which is essentially 5 weeks rather than 4 weeks from today. And then going forward, just sticking with that first Tuesday of the month.
Yep. That's
assuming
fine.
that works for you guys, since that's what we're advertised as meeting at. So
Not a problem.
that'd be great. Thanks. You're going to give us I probably cut into your 2-minute warning. We're live.
You're already live.
Okay. So everybody behave. Hey, Mike, did you find those tree sprites I wrote you about today?
Not yet.
Okay. Do you know how to get rid of them?
Not yet.
So we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Mute. Hey, Brian. May I give you the heads up? I'm going to need to leave about, I would guess, about 45 minutes or so. I've got twin stepchildren who have their 17th birthday today.
Oh, wonderful.
There's
Okay.
a big party, and I don't want to miss it.
Yeah, you shouldn't.
Okay.
Okay. And where do we meet you afterwards for the party?
You have to bring your own wine.
And a mask too?
Yeah. I was just emailing with conversation with someone and made a joke about the seasonalness of having an effigy being burnt in the front yard, and she responded, she said, well, it doesn't really feel all that Halloweenish now because I've been wearing a mask and eating candy for 7 months.
That's good. We'll give one or two more minutes. Most of us are here. I didn't see any regrets, so I'm assuming we'll have full or near full participation. Paul, since we have a minute, we'd like to sort of approve all of your hard work on that master tree list. Is there anything that you are going to want to show us?
Yeah, I can show you on the screen, but I'm also going to email it to everybody right now. I'm doing it this exact moment, but I can just share my screen when it comes time, and I can go over what changes I made from last time.
Great.
And Mike, I haven't heard from you at all, but I don't know if you had any changes to the tree list or edits or anything like that, but we could talk about that when we get there as well. But just if you want, well, I'll email it right now if you want to look through it as we're going along. But anyway, there's been no changes in species, just a few shifting around. Anyway, we'll get to it in a bit.
Great. Okay, we have 10 members. That's easily a quorum, and we now have 11 members, so we're doing well. I'll call the October meeting of the Tree Commission to order. First order of business, you all received the September minutes, had a chance to review them. Are there any corrections, additions? If you don't have anything, you can just shake your head. Looks like, all right, I will call for someone to move that we approve the minutes.
I move to approve.
Second.
Mark moves, 30 seconds. All those in favor, just a wave.
Aye.
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 Excellent.
Brian, I'm not sure I'm actually getting those emails.
Okay. So did you all, so we're having some issues with, I think, the commission's email list, and I'm not sure if that's what's being used to generate emails for invitations or Mike's email. So Mike, we need to double check this because we did have an issue with some people not receiving the invitation today, which I strongly believe comes from our end and not from communications department's end. There seems to be something in our email, so I apologize for that. Did anyone else not get so you didn't get the agenda, you didn't get the entire packet?
I didn't get anything. The only notification that I got today was from Brian earlier this morning, and then the the 1 hour reminder email.
So Mike, well, as we're moving forward, can you try to get that to Jeff?
Yeah.
Have his email and resend it, and everybody else received their materials, I hope. Okay. So we'll work on those bugs. On another technical issue, last meeting I said that we were planning to migrate, so we won't have this issue of emailing things in the future. We're still planning to migrate stuff to some kind of shared folder. There were some questions about that and whether that's going to be a Dropbox or some kind of a Google Drive we all have access to, whether that's just the commission or open to the public. Not that we're trying to hide anything, but there's some things in terms of deliberations and drafts and things like that. So we are working on that. And I think one of the goals for that is that we wouldn't have this issue of having to email, that Mike could, well, he'd still have to send an email saying everything's available, but so we'll make that our goal to get that done for the next meeting. I have a few things I want to mention before we get into our feature presentation for this meeting. First is, I hope that you all saw the issue 2 weeks back of Seaver Weekly. They did a tree issue with at least, I think, 5 or 6 features. They covered trees from pretty much every angle. It was literally a cover story with lots of beautiful pictures. How many of you had a chance to see that issue and read the articles? Everybody, I hope. If not, it's online. But it was they reached out to us about a week or 10 days before, and they said that they had a suite of articles that they wanted to do. The primary one that they wanted to do, for those of you who saw the issue, had to do with the very thing that we and really the rest of the world is talking about in terms of the issues of sustainability, but also environmental justice, social justice. So that really was their feature story. And the reporter interviewed me and Paul. And so that was very timely, and we are grateful to them. We have a couple of other possibilities of getting some more media coverage. Sean Tubbs, who, as you know, has written for years and is back with PEC, does a wonderful newsletter. If you don't get his newsletter of what's going on in terms of the city, his digest of the week's city meetings, it's really a great resource. He wants to write something on the 10th anniversary of the Tree Commission. So in December, actually December 10th, we celebrate our 10th anniversary. So he actually came forward and said he'd like to do something about the founding of the Tree Commission, since he recalls that. And so there's that. And also we have other media opportunities. So we are going to try to continue to work on that and get as much publicity of these issues out there. I know that that's something we've all wanted to do. The first person I heard from when the article, besides a commissioner member, was a former commissioner, Roseanne Simon, who was like, "This is what I've been saying. We need to get articles out there." So she was very pleased, and we're pleased as well. We'll continue to work on that. The second thing in my report is that the city council, as I told you at the last month's meeting, the city council had a work session on October 6th to discuss boards and commissions, the future boards and commissions throughout the rest of the pandemic in terms of meeting. So where we now stand is that we, and I believe all boards and commissions, are approved for essentially one meeting a month for the commission, for our commission. So we will, and that's going forward, so we won't have to apply and ask for that. What we're going to do is move our, since we're about 5 weeks out from the first Tuesday in December, what we're going to do is skip a November meeting, since we would be meeting right after Thanksgiving, and we'll meet beginning in December. We'll be back on our customary first Tuesday of the month. So that works out very nicely. The other thing that the city council, is there a question?
I was just curious, you have the city council, are you presenting to city council in November?
So I'll get to that in a minute.
Okay, good. Yeah.
So then the next issue was committee meetings. And for a time, as you all know, we were not, committees were not allowed to meet because it was not possible for, to support that. We're very fortunate, we're grateful, and I just confirmed with Brian before the meeting began that we have 2 3-hour blocks each month. So what we will do is use a 2-hour block on the first Tuesday for this meeting. And then what we'll endeavor to do is take that other 3-hour block, which we're not splitting up, and set that as committee meetings. We'll have to figure out like what day, how far in advance from that meeting, the full commission meeting, whether that's like a Tuesday mid-month, and then committees will have to just align their schedules and really get used to that being the committee meeting date, because we're not going to be bouncing around all over the calendar. Going to try to get back to some consistency there. So we're really grateful for that opportunity too, because obviously that requires staff, resources, and time to do that, and to allow the committees to meet transparently with public participation. The same rules apply, as you know, which means that we will need to post that meeting, which is why we want to stick to a consistent date, and also post an agenda. If not from committee meetings, we probably won't have a lot of accompanying materials in advance, since that's what gets developed during the meeting, but at a minimum, whatever the agenda for discussion is, we'll want to post that. And that's usually, I think, 3 business days in advance. Right, Mike? I think if we have a Tuesday meeting, we want to post it on no later than Friday, let's say, or early Friday.
That's correct.
So that's going to be the schedule going forward, and I think we should just get used to that for, frankly, I'm just imagining it's all of the year 2021. That's how we'll continue to meet. But this is really great because we have been hobbled in terms of not being able to meet, as have other boards and commissions. So to be able to meet, have our committees meet, will really help us be more efficient and push more projects forward. The last, and this ties into Paul's question, we were going to present tonight some revised data charts and perhaps the draft of text for our annual report to council, but there's still some back and forth on that. And so what we're going to do is have the committee will meet along with myself and Mike and I believe Brian Ray, who's the data person. Basically, the meeting that we've done in the past where we sit down around the conference table, except we won't be around a conference table, and sort of decide like are we all agreement on this? We're showing everything we need to, and also then come up with the bullet points, like the main points we want to stress in the report that we make to council. So there's a report to council, and then of course there's a presentation that will be made to council. That obviously will not happen in November. I've communicated with the clerk. We have a tentative date of December 21st for that. And so that may change because I said that we were aware of council's schedule and its priorities. So if need be, we may find ourselves doing that report in early January, but at least for now, we have a tentative date. What the clerk did say was that council is eager to begin to hear reports. And actually, if I didn't misread her message, was looking to have reports presented at 4 p.m. I assume before all meetings. So that is the schedule. I know that'll make Paul jealous because for a number of years he had to go on site, make the presentation and be there till the wee hours of the morning, but it looks like I'm going to be able to do it from home at 4 p.m. on December 21st. So if there's anything, I know, Paul, I'm getting off easy on that one, but if there's anything, Paul, if there's anything that you think along the way that from your presentation that we're going to want to be merging into the data that we have and coming up with a presentation, I'm actually going to be reaching out to you and we can work on getting that in final form. But we have, I don't want to say this too loudly, but we have plenty of time to get it all together for our scheduled 21st of December. Any questions about any of that? Otherwise, that is the sum and substance of my report. I have a couple of other things to report in the general business, but I don't want to take much more time on that. We are almost at 5:45. So for our first order of business, main order of business, we will have a presentation from Crystal Rittervold. She's the Environmental Sustainability and Facilities Development Manager for the city. She has led a team. From the emails I've seen, it is a team that has worked on the city green print infrastructure guide for some years now, and recently they did a revision, and she's here tonight. She knows that there are a lot of new people on the commission, but she also realized that the commission, at least one or two members and some former members listening in, have some familiarity with this from when it was first being developed. But she also understands there's a lot of people on the commission whose first impression of this was when we provided it to you and you've had a chance to review it over the weekend. So Crystal, who I can appreciate, she said she could give a 4-hour presentation on this and she could get way down in the weeds and it could be a lot about GIS. She's going to try to address all of us and also encourage us to be thinking about some questions. And so we'll have some time to do that. If we go a little over, we have some time in the agenda. This was really an important thing that we wanted to do at this meeting. So we are slotted for half an hour, but if we go a little longer, that's fine. I will, and she'll welcome questions. I'll welcome questions from the commission at the appropriate time. If we have any members of the public joining us too, this would be a good opportunity for 1 or 2 questions from the public at that time. We don't need to save it till the end of the meeting. So that will be the order. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Crystal and she's going to share her screen.
Great. First of all, thank you for inviting me to come and speak about this. I hope that what is conveyed through this presentation is it's something that a lot of people have spent a lot of time on over a long number of years. We've had a variety of disruptions over the course of that time, but we had a chance to send out the green print report in July of 2020, so this summer, and I haven't had a chance really to get a lot of feedback on it. So I'm looking forward to tonight to be part of a discussion about what next. And as Brian just alluded to, this could get really wonky, or this could get sort of policy discussion focused. And I want to make sure, I've tried to be judicious in the slides that I'm putting forward so that it gives you an opportunity to ask the kind of questions that I can then be efficient to answer, if not tonight, in follow-up. So, and forgive me, I've been on 7 hours of Zoom meetings today. So if I trip over myself, that's why.
Me too, Crystal, I'm with you.
Okay, first off, if somebody could confirm that they see my screen, that would be helpful. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is a presentation about the Green Print 1.0, and we called it that because we really want to convey that this is part 1 or phase 1 or round 1 of an effort to look at our green infrastructure in the city of Charlottesville. And we've also been, the project has also been referred to as evaluating and conserving natural assets, planning for a connected landscape. And this is the this is the name that our technical support was providing to us. Let me see if I can pass forward. Okay, so the Green Print 1.0 is actually the outcome of several years of work on this topic. It was grant supported. Some of you are familiar with a group called the Green Infrastructure Center. They got funding from Department of Forestry to do this. And then it had the involvement of an interdepartmental team. Clearly, parks is important. Clearly, utilities was important. Clearly, NDS was important. And then we had our environmental folks. And I also put IT in there because anytime you do things with GIS and trying to load things on websites, you need their friendship. We also had a number of members of different boards and commissions participate, either by responding to presentations that were made or by attending workshops in which we laid a couple of scenarios out for people to dialogue through. But it's pretty much a data collection effort. It's an analysis effort. It's creating a library effort, and it's a snapshot in time that informs our dialogue going forward. So if you look at the way we have presented the concept of green infrastructure on the updated city website, this is how we're presenting it. So it really, it acknowledges that green infrastructure exists at different scales, and whether we're talking regional, within the city limits, at a neighborhood, or in someone's backyard, kind of changes what the focus of the conversation is, but ultimately it's strategically integrating nature into our urban environments to realize these environmental values. And again, to this audience, I don't think we need to go through them, but they're here for your future reference. And while if you ask somebody what is green infrastructure, I would say the majority of people will say trees and forests, but I think we also need to be looking at an urban area that it includes green roofs and stormwater management systems and trail systems and connectivity, and some would go so far as to say solar systems. These are all green technologies that create infrastructure in our community. So, you know, just a little tour. Oops, sorry, going backwards. Bear with me. Okay. Sorry. So who here remembers 2014 when City Council passed a resolution that was referred to as a context-sensitive streets resolution? It was fairly comprehensive, but one of the components that was added was green infrastructure component, but it wasn't really clearly discussed or described what that would look like. And so we had some meetings with city councilors and a couple of other stakeholders who were brought in. And one of the outcomes of that discussion was that Charlottesville, we needed to tell our story, because at the end of the day, we have been doing nuggets of green infrastructure work. We had been calling it different things. We had been calling it urban forest management. We had been calling it trails planning. We had been calling it parks planning, but we hadn't brought all of these efforts under one roof. And so when we recognized that we had a lot of stories to tell and we had a lot of good projects to point to, whether they be on the private side or the public side, we decided to take advantage of some cloud-based GIS opportunity to build out a map or a library, and we refer to it as the City Green Map. And I put the hyperlink up in the upper corner of this slide. But essentially, you have the opportunity to take a tour around the city and look at various themes, which are listed on the right side, starting with green stormwater infrastructure, but going through buildings, energy, natural resources, agriculture, essentially transportation, et cetera, and either get that overview across the city or dive into individual projects in that map and get additional information, whether it's metrics or case studies or directions to other websites. So this was the first attempt at trying to tell the story. And then we were fortunate in September of 2015 to get this technical assistance grant award, in which the Green Infrastructure Center worked with us to propose tools and strategies to promote green infrastructure. And they were going to do that through mapping, assessment, analysis, storytelling, and graphics. So for several years, frankly, we worked on all those different pieces. And as I mentioned before, we convened staff on a number of occasions to go through what we had, what we were missing, how we could package it, how we could digitize things. We made a number of presentations to council and to tree commission and to place task force, for example. And we currently, under our new web page, have a page dedicated to this green infrastructure topic, and all the work products that came out of this effort are available through that. And one of the things I want to do is give you all a little bit of a tour of what we arrived at. So one of the things that we created is what we call asset maps, and it's a building block set of maps that started with the aerial photograph, which is in the background and nothing new to you all, which is why it's hidden, but impose on that what we call the gray infrastructure of the community. So right, that's the roads, that's the buildings, the rail, the tracks, things like that. Impose on that the tree canopy is another really core piece of our asset mapping. And then starting to look at where our trail network is, where our parks are. Those of you who remember the initiative called Streets That Work, there were framework streets that came out of that piece. We started looking at where are there large patches of tree canopy versus individual trees, so that we could start seeing where geographically are those forests that are providing ecosystem services in our community. And so the end result was, how do we look through these different lenses at where the green threads are throughout the community? So if you go to the website, you will see this listing of PDF asset maps. And I think that they can be used by a lot of people for a lot of different questions. And our goal here is to put it all in one place, so that if you're interested in the tree canopy, but you want to pull up a map next to it that says, where are our major watersheds with respect to that, or where are our public schools even with respect to that, they're all in the same place. So one of the other things we ended up being able to do is kind of drill in with the tree canopy data that had been provided and just start mapping, where is the distribution of tree canopy by neighborhood. And some of that had been done prior to this project. But we went also further to see not only the tree canopy distribution by neighborhood, but what about the streets in the neighborhood? Everyone is interested in an experience walking, biking, traveling through the streets, about what the experience is with and without trees. And as you can see, there's some disparity, not only in where, and you all know this, but I'm just showing you what this report puts out there for general consumption, that it's not equitable across neighborhoods, and that you have neighborhoods that may have a lot of trees, but they may not have a lot of trees along their street corridors. Similarly, for those interested in the relationship between forest and canopy and water quality, we looked at what the tree canopy is by watersheds and sub-watersheds. Again, looking at strategies that are relevant for Chesapeake Bay water quality requirements. Where might those opportunities be? Years ago, I think it was 2005, the city passed a water protection ordinance that established stream buffers, dedicated required stream buffers on Morris Creek, Meadow Creek, and the Rivanna to mirror the buffers that had been established on the county side. And there's been an ongoing conversation about whether expanding that buffer code would make sense to our smaller streams. And so it's interesting to look at the data from this report that looks at what that percentage of buffered streams is even without that code requirement. So perhaps it informs a conversation about requirement versus voluntary versus encouragement. It also really presents where those streams are and where the buffered opportunities are, whether it's on private property or city owned. Again, who's got the opportunity to make improvements? The report looks at clearly where the tree patches are, the forest patches are, but also some of the sizes of those patches. As I mentioned before, I love a single tree and I love the forest. I don't want to argue the value of one versus another, because it depends what we're trying to accomplish. But through this data crunching, the report presents a number of facts and statistics, many of which I think are interesting to inform the discussion. So one of the other things that was looked at is some of the ways in which you could attribute the benefits of adding trees to the system based on where that parcel lies and what that parcel sort of metrics are. Are they parcels near schools? Are they parcels at economic areas? Are they parcels in entrance corridors? Are they parcels in low income neighborhoods? Are they parcels? You can start lumping and splitting this data a million ways. And it wasn't to this project to define the questions. The exercise was to try to pull as much data together as possible so that questions could be asked. But there's ways of looking at it, like if we have a limited amount of money and we want to plant trees near schools and also near certain, we can ask the question in a lot of different ways. So either can we figure out a particular parcel and what its characteristics are, or are we trying to find all the parcels that meet a particular filter, such as under a certain tree canopy percent neighborhood? Or are we trying to find the parcels that have multiple criteria, economic, environmental, and social? So, so the map that you see here is essentially the tree canopy. And so you see the green is the tree canopy and the white is the less treed or untreed areas. And what was originally presented was called a possible planting areas map, which in its simplest form is the inverse of the tree canopy. And it really suggests potential. But we know that there's a big gap between potential and even feasibility or suitability and reality. And some of that is by refining the parameters around a possible planting area. And then it obviously requires field checking and ground truthing, et cetera. So as we note, when we worked on something called this refined possible planting area map, we were not talking about best planting area. We were talking about we're still talking about possible areas. And I'll show you some maps, but the points on those maps don't mean that exact GPS point or XY coordinate is where the tree has to go. It's just that that's an area that, looking through these various filters, there are possibilities. And again, the last bullet, it's really important. We're doing this at a citywide 30,000 foot level, and it's very different when you're looking on an individual property at where exactly the best place is for the tree. Some of you who have seen this presentation, and I know, Paul, you've been in a previous presentation. I can't remember, Jody, if you have been, but what we tried to do is take that universe of possible planting areas and start teasing out those things we know to be conflicts, whether it's the actual railroad can be teased out, buffering existing trees so that we have spacing between what's there and what we want to look at exploring, buffering buildings, a lot of discussions about buffering utilities. We were able to work with Dominion and get their overhead line GIS layer so that we could account for that. It wasn't to say you can't plant trees under overhead lines, it's that it may inform what kinds of trees. And then the GIS exercise essentially tried to generate, as randomly distributed, but appropriately spaced points with an appropriate planting distance. And again, this is where we can get really weedy really fast, and I'd have to go back and review some of the technical documents. But the point being, we're trying to maximize the number of possible planting areas without having to debate these things that we're trying to filter out. Because we all know that there's ongoing debate between utilities and trees, utilities and buildings, trees and existing buildings. And then these other opportunities of looking at neighborhoods, looking at, is the property public or private? Is it in a public right of way? Because the city, that's the area the city is limited to plant trees in. And again, looking at some of these other criteria, be it stormwater, economic development, etc. So zooming right along, where we landed were two, I would call them binders of maps. The first binder is a tile set of maps, so equal scale across the city. And so you see the image on the left is a tile applied over the city. Sort of zoom into one of those tiles, grid F5, and you see these numerous dots, which indicate whether it is a possible planting area with no overhead utility or with an overhead utility, and then the variety of characteristics to help bring a story to that particular area as it pertains to trees. These are all available on the website as PDFs, so you can zoom in quite close and get into the details of it. I would submit that this is probably for scouting purposes and for looking, for looking from one area of the city across the other. But what we found is that often there are conversations or interests at the neighborhood level. So we have another set of maps that specifically looks at the neighborhood level, and then at the neighborhood level with some different scenarios. So again, each of these pages in the map book is at a different scale based on the size of the neighborhood, but you can toggle between the two sets. The neighborhood covers 4 different tiles on the city map. You can start at one place and then go to the other one to get that additional detail. So what you see online is that city-wide map book, and it specifically has a set of pages that are looking at everything within the city, and then a set of pages that presents just the results for opportunities within the right-of-way. And the reason there's a little bit of a difference there is, again, as I said, depending on who's doing the planting, if you exclude the private property, you have the opportunity to reshuffle that 40-foot spacing that I mentioned earlier in the GIS exercise, and you may be able to cram more trees in the right-of-way if they don't have to take trees in that private property into consideration. So again, it's a little technical, but the idea is, are we looking at informing a city-funded tree planting exercise in the right-of-way, or are we talking about tree planting opportunities across the city? And then here you see, as I mentioned, for the neighborhoods, there are these various categories, right? You can look at a neighborhood and see, I'm interested in hotspots of planting density opportunity, or I'm interested in looking at where trees could be planted relative to heat island in that particular neighborhood, or we're interested in knowing where that tree planting opportunity is relative to a particular drainage area. So again, I just submit to you, there's this is a pretty comprehensive library now of various ways to look at the data. So these map books were actually ready a couple years ago, and I would say the challenge in posting these and making them available is not having them contextualized well. And so the effort was to create the book that actually would be the background. And so Greenprint 1.0 is the book that came out of that, or the report that came out of that. It describes the various green infrastructure programs that the city's been involved with. It describes the various assets that we have, the maps that have been generated, these facts and statistics from our programs. some tips on how to use the various maps, some suggested questions that could be thrown at the data, this analysis of tree planting opportunities, and then some resources. And I don't know, again, I believe the memo was shared with you as well, but we have already talked about this document or this project being a starting point for really figuring out collaboration and coordination, both internal to the city and with external partners. I mean, I honestly keep looking at it as our library, our green infrastructure library. It's done this initial screening exercise. It provides a window into where some planting opportunities exist, and it helps us, without speculating, see the data that says that there's more planting opportunities on private property than there is on public property. It gives us resources to look at where green infrastructure can get us, can pursue multiple goals. I think it provides an opportunity for the development process to see where that project lands in the context of these green threads throughout the community. It's certainly material that the various boards and commissions, city council and planning commission can use. I think that it could position us well for pursuing some funding because we have some data to base funding requests or project ideas on. And so what's next? Again, this project, we tried very carefully for it not to script our next steps because this city has not yet had the chance to come around and talk about green infrastructure in this comprehensive manner. The good thing is, I think we have the opportunity to do some updating to this work because we do have 2020 aerial imagery that will provide the opportunity to update our urban tree canopy status. And I know that Mike's secured some funding to help support that work. Some of you and some of city staff are participating in the ICLEI forest and tree carbon accounting because we know that there's a link between trees and the topic of sequestration or decarbonization and how that fits into our climate action planning. I think that there's opportunities really to integrate stewardship into these services and programs. And when I say that, I mean things like our water resources protection program. What are the types of projects that get funded through the existing programs? Some of the park staff and I have talked about creating a family of plans that bring an umbrella over things like urban forest management, invasive species management, wildlife management, integrated pest management, and then I would submit the implementation of the types of things coming out of a report like this. Next, it's a challenging budget time, but trying to inform requests for funding, this hopefully could help. And then I think we owe it to the work that's been done and to keep this going, and the momentum is to keep telling the story and keep promoting the value of green infrastructure and natural resources in our urban area. So again, I think that there's a lot that we could unpack or we could get into on almost every single one of these slides. But in the interest of time, I do want to go to questions, but I want to pose the Tree Commission a question, which is, for those of you who have had time to read this and think about it, on a scale of 1 to 10, how valuable is this? And is this helpful? And if so, how? And what kind of questions does it generate? And who needs to be involved? So kind of turn the question period over to you all.
Great work, Crystal. I've got a quick question that's probably really obvious, but how do I download the data sets, like the Canopy data sets and the other content that's on that site, like the raw data?
So right now it's, I think it depends on what, I think we can work with you to get it to you.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty familiar with the open data Charlottesville site. And I mean, your work is awesome. This is just fantastic stuff. So I really can't wait to look at it in more detail. But yeah, just to start off, thank you. I think it's incredibly helpful. Can't wait to dig in and see how to work with the content. Great job.
Yeah, and I have to, I have to admit that one of our challenges is data is only as good as it is maintained, right? And the other part of it is having the, I don't know, the fluency or the bandwidth or the direction to be the one who owns this data and who is the recipient of these kind of what if questions. And that's not really landed somewhere clearly right now. We could use a lot of GIS support to really exercise the data muscle that we have here.
So I read the beginning of the report, probably the introduction, that this wasn't a full revision, but that it was an update of the original. So is a lot of that sort of the data part of it, or what would you?
No, I would say the report was released before staff had the opportunity to do a final review.
Okay.
And there were either updates to website directions. We renamed the parks appropriately in all the data layers. There was some language and some text modifications that we were still working through. And frankly, we had gotten derailed on it for a little while.
Sure.
So in acknowledgement that the bulk of the work was done, I think 2017 is the date on there, 2018. We just wanted to acknowledge we've done an update, but not substantive. It's mostly cosmetic in some way. It's to be as accurate as possible as what was coming forward.
It's a tremendous resource, not just for the city, but for our community, and a way to help sort of solidify collaborations between those groups, because it touches on everything. I know we've been talking, the commission has increasingly been talking over the last year and a half on some of these issues, but obviously we talk about pretty much all of them. I'm the least data person here and the least scientific, so I tend to let the others lead that conversation. But are there others who have comments or questions for Crystal, or we have time to have a conversation about this?
I do, Brian. Crystal, thank you very much. You're preaching to the choir here.
And I'm trying to figure out how to unshare my screen. Sorry.
Well, that's okay. No, I wanted to ask you, thank you. I mean, you've done a yeoman's work. It's just incredible. So my key thought is, how are we going to use all the this resource? And Anson and I just had a conversation with Ann Little, who heads up Tree Fredericksburg and is also on the board of Trees Virginia. And they have a very robust commission. It's called the Green Commission, to attack these issues, not just of trees, but climate change, also sustainability issues. And their team is made up of the 3 staff departments in the city: Parks and Rec, Sustainability, Public Works, your department, and planning. So that, and then it includes representatives would be from groups like the Tree Commission and university and whatnot, but it's appointed by council. There's a council member on it. And they are doing amazing work, because it's really a team effort across departments and other interested organizations. For instance, they're planting thousands of trees. That's just one thing, but they're doing all kinds of watershed improvement. And I just wondered, we can't let this resource go unused. For instance, the Tree Commission is not using you as all your maps as a resource about where to plant trees. But, it seems to me that the next steps, we've got to make sure that your resource is used. And I wondered, had you thought about having some kind of commission like Fredericksburg does?
I have not thought about a commission. I think a lot about the different department resources needing to intentionally work together in this space, and have it be comprehensive so that it is about green infrastructure with trees being one of those components. But that's why that idea of like a, what is it called? The collection of plans. You know, there's so many of these topics that are interwoven. And there's so much of the opportunity that is in the public realm, I mean, in the private realm. And frankly, until this I think until this report came out, and this is the first of hopefully several discussions about how does the city use this body of work, and does it matter? You know, I can tell you that this is not Crystal's report. I mean, there are a lot of people in the city and the consultants, et cetera, who helped pull this together. So I think there's a conversation that is warranted about, given all of the things that we are working on in Charlottesville, should this be one of those priority topics? I'm biased. I
Yeah.
happen to think it's a very important topic,
Well, I
but
think,
there's a lot of other decision-making bodies that need to whom this value proposition needs to be made. Like, who cares?
yeah, well, I mean, it's not only, you know, trees, of course. I mean, climate, I think this community would think that the climate crisis is a crisis for our generation and future generations. I mean, there's also, as you talked about, the whole health issues with the environment and trees and low canopy neighborhoods. It's environmental justice is social justice. So those issues, I think, are incredibly important to the community. And I think, you know, we have to sound the foghorn or whatever it is, along with you, and, you know, don't let this study sit on the shelf, as so many of them do. And I think we need to figure out how to, you know, make your work important. So I looked at the model of Fredericksburg. I'm really impressed with what they're doing. Anson was involved in the conversation too with Ann. She's a one-person dynamo, you know, but they're doing a lot of things that I think we are not doing in Charlottesville.
And to tie into Peggy's comments and to yours, Crystal, this has been on the mind of the commission for quite some time, because multiple agencies within the government, city government, are part of the, you know, the question, the solution. And so Parks and Rec is a large part of it, but, you know, we've been wanting to make sure that we build relationships throughout the city to work with people, to collaborate. This is a good basis for that. But just so you know, I mean, this is something internally that we've been talking about for quite a while, that not only are the issues important, but the way to address these issues, since they all are interrelated, is through a broader collaboration. And the Tree Commission is committed to doing that. Are there other comments or?
Yeah, I'd love to just say, you know, this is terrific, Crystal. I think it's an incredible report and a resource, and I'm well done. I echo Peggy's question about sort of how to get agencies to sort of reach across the aisle, if you will. I feel like there's a lot of different, you know, it's really hard to implement reports. I mean, reports in the city just disappear, you know, and then it's like, oh, remember that report? Yeah, we'd spent a lot of time on that. And I don't mean to be negative, because I think reports are very useful. But I also think that creating sort of these committee groups that work together on these common issues are really, you know, I know that utilities, you know, you have a lot of work in the city on these initiatives. But sometimes they may not tie to what NDS is doing, or they may not tie to what Parks and Rec is doing, you know, and so there often seems to be a disconnect between, you know, the urgency of what you're presenting and then how other groups are sort of prioritizing them, or, you know, looking at them from a, you know, oversight standpoint. You know, are you protecting trees on sites, or are you, you know, so it's sort of interdepartmental. How do you get all the groups to talk to each other better? To sort of see these through. And I guess, while I could easily get into the weeds of so many questions I have about, like, you know, is there a way to distinguish what's a renter owned versus which is, you know, owner, you know, like a property owned by a homeowner, you know, that we don't want to impose sort of trees on communities in a way that, that potentially gentrifies those communities, or, changes their value, and renters get kicked out or something like that. So, how do we, but it seems like building this consensus that it doesn't come from just a one-sided community. That you have lots of people sort of weighing in on what is really important in this process. So I don't know. I like the idea of sort of an interdepartmental commission to work together on this, but do you think that's even possible? That's question one. And then two, from this report, is there any low-hanging fruit you see from it that's like trees in the ground tomorrow? Like, what is the first thing you would do if you want to get trees in the ground, besides have money to do so?
Oof. Well, my thoughts as a response to your first question is, before we persuade anyone to create a new commission, I must think that I've heard someone use this phrase, we have to find our soul. Like, what is it this community wants out of green infrastructure? Is it clean air? Is that the drive? Is that the end goal? Is it temperature modification or tempering in certain neighborhoods? Is it aesthetics? Is it habitat? I don't think it's up to me to impose my value on that. I think that's a conversation that really needs to be had, because it will inform, I think, the mechanism by which those issues are tackled. My fear would be if we set up a commission. Yeah, because my fear is setting up a commission. That commission won't really know what it's tasked with trying to work through. So that, I think that's where we often come to a kind of a screeching halt, is we can show you all this data, but I don't know what this community wants. And how do we have a conversation about what value do these various components of green infrastructure have? Are they native meadows? Are they pollinator habitat? Is it shaded travel ways? Are they larger tracts of intact, healthy, resilient forest? I mean, those are all unanswered questions, or is it everything?
And who should answer those questions?
A compromise at some point?
I get the sort of like the vastness of the question, and you wouldn't want to task a commission, or an interdepartmental agent, group to sort of say, all right, what's our priority here? Like, how do we get those questions answered? Like, who can answer those? How would we do that?
I had a similar question.
Maybe.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I should let Crystal answer.
Yeah.
But I thought, Paul, your second question is really an interesting. It's interesting because depending on who takes it on, the idea of low-hanging fruit, or to use another sort of favorite sustainability term, there are out there, we know they exist, these kind of win-win situations that would address multiple issues that are shown in those charts, right? Let's assume like there's a link of stream buffer that if you just completed it, it would create habitat and it would clean the water, it would start to do all this stuff. So, the most exciting part of the presentation to me, and it was also really amazing how the data is being analyzed, was where you're trying to sort of use the tools to figure out, if you had one tree, where would it go? Or thinking of it less singularly, like what initiative, if you had X amount of dollars, would create like the best bang for your buck for overall ecosystem services. And I feel like this group, the Tree Commission, could look at it kind of in that way, but it's sort of the reverse of analysis. It's like a design. The way a designer would look at it would be like, we have this idea, there's this thing, and here are all the reasons it would be a great idea, using the tool to make the case, but first having the idea. And those kinds of things tend to get the community, this question of who are we and what do we care about, tend to fall in line just behind great ideas. So, you know, I would love to figure out a way to catalyze the community to come up with proposals that would address a lot of these issues and kind of analyze those as projects to see which, you know, if we came up with 10 projects as a multidisciplinary group without even forming a committee, just a kind of ad hoc thing, you know, we now have the tools to sort of say, this is the reason that these 3 projects are really amazing. So, you know, that's a non-analytical approach that uses the analysis to actually measure the benefit of an idea. And that's the way I would like to figure out how to find the low-hanging fruit.
Other comments? I did want to, since I said at the beginning, since we're talking about the public, are there any members of the public who would like to comment or ask a question? Anson is watching to see if there are any.
Jody's up.
Jody's up. Okay.
Brian, could I just say one thing quick, or just ask? Crystal, my head's reeling from all that you've shown us, and you focused on the tree commission, and that's just a small aspect of this incredibly powerful tool that your team has created. I'm wondering, just by going through this exercise of integrating all these disparate components into one place, has anything shown itself to you all, to your team, about conflicts and problems that have come up just by virtue of the fact that you've put all this information in one place and you've really see it for the first time integrated in one place? Has it started to suggest some problems and issues that that need to be addressed now?
I don't know that it's presented problems. I know that Parks has used the data and the map set to have interns go and ground truth some of those possible planting areas and inform some of the actual planting. So I would say kind of flip it. I think it's actually been useful. As I had mentioned earlier, I was kind of excited to do this presentation because frankly, you're the first entity to whom this report was sent who has asked for a presentation. And so it could be a recommendation by this body that it gets presented at a city council meeting with some discussions about what is it we're trying to accomplish. You know, again, one of our limitations right now is that I don't have access to the GIS capacity to run a bunch of scenarios and throw what if questions at the data. I don't have it. And so maybe there could be some brainstorming on how to bring that capacity to this discussion. Because I think that idea of saying, like, let's find some compelling projects that accomplish several things and consider whether those are the ones to move forward with versus looking now at the static data, where the dots are, and asking for $200,000. You know, I don't think that's as compelling as if we could say, here's a location with a set of planting, you know, with a planting project, you know, around a school in a low income area near X, Y, and Z on a framework street. Like we've ticked off maybe 3 or 4 out of 6 or 7 goals. Maybe we can't do all of them all of the time, but kind of like the streets that work, sometimes we have to find those things that fit in that particular space. But we don't have that. We don't have that decision-making tool because we haven't set up what the things are we're trying to accomplish. This is just making suggestions about all the good things green infrastructure offers. But until we land at kind of the subset of things that are valuable to us.
And ideally, city council's new strategic planning would create that sort of beginning that would filter down and start to inform the commissions and green infrastructure on what kinds of things to focus on. But I don't, that's an idealistic way of looking at it, a hopeful way.
When you say you don't have all the resources to ask all these questions, is some of this a data size question? I mean, are you saying you don't have like 50 gigs of online GIS mapping capability, or 100 gigs or 500 gigs or whatever?
Or are you just missing
we don't have
Mark and Bart? Like
we
you don't
don't
have a
have the human.
person. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean,
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't have the human capital to respond to inquiries.
Oh, that would be a really fun project to make that transparent and kind of pitch that at data science people. I mean, that seems very in line with what some of the folks at the Data Science Institute are interested in trying to tackle. Would be a laundry list of queries, and then you just have people looking at geospatial queries, do something transparent. That seems like an open source dream come true. I mean, getting good questions and getting good people on it. Sorry, I'm watching my dog run down the street. I have got to run. I will see you guys in a bit.
One immediate way I think that the commission can weigh in on this. I mean, we have a draft statement to City Council on the strategic plan. So there's got to be a way that we can pick up on some of this conversation and say that, these, reference this report directly and the great resource it is and what more we could do with it, and that this really should be part of the city's vision going forward. So, I mean, I think that we're still working. We got a final draft we're going to talk about in a few minutes, but I think there's a way that we can also highlight this work that you've done in this resource. So.
And just to Anson's question too, Crystal, do you ever, I know in the past, there's been some overlap with NDS and UVA, and they're sort of different departments, but would there be any interest in engaging UVA, professors to look at this data and sort of start to work through some of these questions? Obviously they can make it into seminars and classes, and you have lots of people looking at it and sort of making hypotheses about what might be the answers to these questions. Do you think that's a possibility?
I mean, I think we can look into it again, since I'm not I don't get my hands like all stuck in the data, the actual GIS. I just need to go back to our team and understand the reality of what format all of that is in and how quickly it could be made accessible so that those with bandwidth can be on the receiving end of the inquiries. I don't have a problem sharing the data. It's all fine.
Yeah, I guess trying to get to that question you had initially about like, where should the focus be? Where do we go from here? It seems like there's a great report, and the outcome is sort of, here's a lot of data, we have it all available, we don't know what to do next with it. And trying to think about what groups would help, and if we we have contacts at UVA that we can reach out to professors over there in these different departments that we can say, hey, are you interested in a project like this? It helps determine what is the best solution to go forward with here, or or if this is strategic plan material where we literally go to the landscape architects and say, what is the best plan here? You're the professional, like you help create, sort of an actionable next step for us. I'm just still trying to get my head around what to do next with this because it's so terrific.
So again, I want to thank you. This won't be the last conversation we have with you. We're eager to be partners and to move forward. So thank you very much. You see clapping hands. Hope you can hear that too. And we're going to move on to the next part of our agenda. If there were any questions, Anson had to run to check on his dog, and Anson's actually the person who manages our public interface. So we'll hold those over if there are any members of the public who are listening and would like to comment or question at the end of the public, during the public comment section. So now we'll go, thank you, Crystal.
Thank you all very much.
You've had a long day, so we're going to say say bye to you. All right, so we have member reports. We'll start with, since we're talking about our draft statement, which we sent around, I understand that there is another member who did not receive, I don't know, the minutes, Emily. I just happened to peek at the chat session, so I want to apologize again. I have no idea what is going on with our email list, but if we do one thing before the next meeting, besides the report to council, we're going to get this squared away because it's not fair to those of you who come to the meeting and don't have the materials. So I'm not sure if you received those at this point, Emily, but Mike, if you can, otherwise get them to her. The first item is just a sort of a opportunity to comment on the draft statement which we sent around for the city strategic plan. I hope you all had a chance. Peggy's going to lead a little bit of discussion on this.
All right. I don't know if, hopefully you've had a chance to read it. In 2017, the city set some strategic goals. One of them was to have a beautiful and sustainable natural environment. They are now updating it. And the next meeting, they had one meeting, which I spoke to a little bit and told them that the tree commission was going to send them a report. And so the next meeting is November 20th and then in December 15th. And I think, I don't know if Crystal's still there, but part of it, I think it's our duty to, we've got to be sort of the marketers. What's important about trees and the environment? I think that's, again, one thing we learned from Ann Little, and Anson's not here, but he would repeat, is that she said, you know, you guys got a marketing problem. You've got to make sure that the community and the officials know how important green infrastructure is. And then you can get a lot of things done. So that's what we're going to try to do. We're going to talk about what's the vision of city council and what's the reality. The vision is to have this beautiful green environment, having lush neighborhoods, tree-lined streets. But the reality is, in the last number of years, is that we're not getting there. We are taking down almost the same number of trees that we plant a year, so we're not increasing canopy. We're not following some of our own zoning ordinances. We're allowing waivers to front yard setbacks so that no trees can be planted in new development. And so we're creating heat zones of the future. And those are the things we need to point out to them. We have a document that calls Streets That Work, and actually we're creating streets that don't work because they're not planting trees along them. So we want to let the city know how important green infrastructure is and what do we need to do. I mean, we're going to give some examples. Like Richmond spends about $3 a person on trees. We spend about $1. Fredericksburg is doing thousands of trees planted a year. We need to enforce our current zoning ordinances. And as we look to upgrade our comprehensive plan and new zoning ordinance, we need to look at what innovative communities across the Commonwealth are doing. Richmond, for instance, when developers take down public trees, they have to pay into the value of the tree into the Parks Department or the arborist departments to plant new trees. So, and another thing, talking about creating cross-departmental teams that are going to work on this issue of trees and the environment. So those are the kind of things we're going to be talking about. And I think, just like Crystal said, green infrastructure is just as important as, and that includes trees, soil, and water, as important to gray infrastructure, sidewalks, roads, buildings, or whatnot. So I think we have a marketing problem, as Ann Little would say. We need to get this across to many people. So I don't know if you all have read it, do you have any suggestions of how we can do a better job? We appreciate it.
Yeah, I've certainly read it, and I think it's exceptional. I went to the last planning commission meeting, which went till after 1 o'clock, in the morning. And I was going to add public comments at the very end, but by the time it got to part-time worker policies at 12:50 a.m., I was like, I'm out. I'm not putting anyone else through this torture to talk about trees. But one thing, there's so many, it feels like trees are this common denominator in a lot of our current issues with community, the community builders. They have, real climate benefits from a, reduction of fossil fuel usage in households, but they also have health benefits in communities. And equity to some extent. We pointed out, as in Crystal's diagram, about sort of the low canopy areas are also sort of where are historically African American neighborhoods and red line neighborhoods, which homeownership was sort of restricted from those people who are living in those neighborhoods. And that has these long-term ramifications. And there's one person that spoke after in the planning commission meeting, in the city council meeting, about after two discussions about sort of the importance of climate in the community. There was a Pamela Brown, I'm forgetting Pamela's last name, Bryce Brown, anyway. But she talked a lot about sort of what are the needs of African American communities and what are the needs of just sort of white communities or sort of more affluent communities. And there's sort of this desire for trees and bike lanes and walking paths, but there are majorly much bigger issues happening in where it's a survival based needs. It's like, I need to have food, I need to have just to pay my utility bills. And there's such bigger issues. So when I think we just have to tread carefully about the equity in trees issue and acknowledge sort of, if we're planting lots of trees in areas that are rental based, are we changing those neighborhoods while we're making them better for the residents? Are we eventually kicking those residents out because then rents go up and such? So there's a fine line. It's impossible for the tree commission and the city to sort of answer these, or at least us to answer all these questions. But I think it has to be constantly in the discussion about this as well. So, but I do think that argument of trees being a really common denominator, Crystal sort of asking the question of what's most important? Well, there's a lot of benefits to shade that we all know, and building good communities that I hope we can sort of advocate for to council. So anyway, this is a great document to help do that.
I would agree, Paul, that the equity issue is much broader. The only thing I would just sort of highlight is that as part of that equity issue is health disbenefits, and clearly,
Totally.
So we have to, obviously this needs to be a full stakeholder invested process, whatever we do, which we have a track record for doing that, obviously in the Belmont project.
Yep.
We're stakeholders. We didn't just drop trees in there. And so I think and in the article, in the Seaville Weekly, we've tried to make that clear as well. But I think that it's always important to stress that none of us really on the tree commission are talking about trees as just beautiful things, that your neighborhood isn't a good neighborhood unless it has pretty trees. Obviously the health issue, to me, that should be the front and center equity issue when we talk about trees. So anybody who, by the way, I want to thank Peggy and Roxanne, who I think might be on, but I can't see because Anson has stepped away to chase his dog. They're the ones who really, the initiative of drafting this statement. Paul contributed a lot to it, and Mark reviewed and contributed. So again, because we're working going forward, my hope is that we'll have the opportunity to sort of rope in more members of the commission earlier on in the process. But because we were working sort of in these restrictions as to how we could operate during the early part of the pandemic, so we've dropped this not dropped it, we've given you some days to read it, but there's a lot in there. And so for those of you who didn't participate in the drafting of this, we still have some time because the meeting is the 20th. We do want to get it there in time for them to read, but I feel as though, Peggy, correct me if I'm wrong, we probably have about a week to get a final draft to council so they have an opportunity to review it, correct?
Mike, could you verify that? You said once before we need to send it 2 weeks before. Of course,
2 weeks is typical.
So 2 weeks.
Typical. So
So
2 weeks.
So we have about a week from now for us to submit, to be 2 weeks before the meeting.
And Mike, I have a question about the comment period. And when is, if we were to sort of make a, have our 3 minutes to make a comment, what is the best time to do that? And I guess we just need to sign up in advance for that. So we want to sort of, when's the first available opportunity to sign up for that comment option?
Or with that meeting for the strategic plan meeting. I'd have to check, but it's when the agenda goes out, it would be the best time to sign up.
Public hearing, I think public comments, I think are at the beginning of the meeting.
Correct.
It's a long meeting. It goes from like 11 o'clock to 5 o'clock.
Hey, this is Brian Wheeler. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
For the strategic planning meetings, there is no sign up for public comment.
Okay. So you just,
you just raise your hand in the webinar.
got it. Thanks, Brian.
At the beginning, Brian?
They
At the beginning of the
mayor's comments at the beginning.
You're breaking up, Brian.
At the end of each.
We lost you, Brian.
Lost you.
Couldn't hear any of that.
Okay, he's muted. We'll verify that for sure. So, but to get back to the point, we have roughly a week to get it in shape, to get it to them. So they have 2 weeks to review it. So what I would encourage everybody, all commissioners, to have another look at it after the meeting. If you have any comments on it, I do think, to my point to Crystal, I do think that we can work something in there to just, highlight this great resource, and, we'll add that somewhere into the report. Is there anything else, Peggy, you want to say about that, or move on to the next agenda item?
I don't know.
Okay. I'm watching the clock. I mean, it was a great use of time for the report. I just want to make sure that we get, I see your hand, Tim. Hold on. I just want to make sure that we get through the rest of the agenda. Tim, comment?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief. First of all, I echo the others' comments that I think it's a fantastic document. There's so much persuasive information in there. I think when I looked at the green print document, that document actually emphasizes we should be conserving our urban forest, and that's much more beneficial to our community than planting new trees. It's not an either or proposition. But to that point, I'm wondering if the tagline at the top of this document could reflect that more holistic strategy, in the sense of Charlottesville should be protecting our urban street trees, conserving our urban forest, and planting, many more trees, or something like. I know you can't have a paragraph for a title, but I'm just wondering if there's a way to almost prime them for that sort of, multifaceted approach to making our urban environment more sustainable. And then quickly, I just leave that out there. I'm happy to help if there's any receptivity to that. And then the other thing was, I think Peggy mentioned that in talking with the Fredericksburg leader, if you get people persuaded that this is important, then all these policy wins can start to line up. I think to that point, if there's great information on this front page, but if I picked this up and there was 3 big paragraphs at the very beginning, it would be hard to receive that information clearly. So I'm wondering if there's a way to have almost something like a cover memo that says trees are important for X, Y, and Z, including the list that, extends beyond the obvious, which is, we know, but almost in a way that correlates with the following subsections that have already been beautifully written. So making it punchier and more persuasive on the first page could help kind of grab people's attention and make them more inclined to be persuaded and do more.
Those are two great points. And what we can do is we can have like a little executive summary, and we can stress, it's an excellent point, and we can stress the fact that we need to preserve and expand the urban forest. So we'll figure out some catchy one sentence. I see thanks Tim. I see Mark has his hand.
Yeah, I'm interested, for the sake of the CATS group. This is labeled as a draft, obviously, but can I share it with the CATS board members like immediately, so that if they have any input, or just for informing them. And then at some point, it would be great for me to have the ability to make it available to all of the CATS members. I think we have about 125 or 140 people, and that would give a certain amount of currency to this work, which this is really, I'm very impressed with the conciseness and yet comprehensive nature of this statement.
To the latter, we can certainly share it as a public statement. As to sharing it as a draft, I mean, I'm most concerned in terms of like numbers of people that we're sharing a draft with, because
Well, the draft, I mean, the board is, I think, about 8 people.
Yeah, I don't think we can accept comments from CATS on this, but it certainly is a document that could be shared if they're interested, sort of. But I'd say you just as well wait for once it's totally once we submit it, then it's a public document. I don't know. What's your thoughts, Peggy?
Yeah, we've been working a long time, and it's sort of like,
Yeah, like, oh, do we have to look at this?
I guess, Mark, the answer would be that it's also a matter of timing. Like we still have some revisions to do on it. So it's not that we don't want to share. I guess in another go around, another document like this, we'd bring people in a little sooner. But given the circumstances, few of us just worked on it. So, I mean, I guess I'd be inclined to say at this point, we really can't take a lot more in. I mean, we have been through many drafts. So
I think this is draft 6.
no, we're on 7.
We're on 7. Sorry, yeah.
Well,
No,
Mark, can we just? It looks like we'll have it done within a week, and then give it to you and share it. You can share it with your group. Does that make sense?
That's totally fine. It's just that I wanted to give as many advocates for this work, and it's amazing. So I'd like them to know all this work that you've done.
Perfect. So they will have it in advance,
great.
well in advance of the public hearing, so that if they want to also participate in the public hearing, they've read this statement.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, we have it next week to give it to them. They'll have 2 weeks, and we can also send it to them saying, hey, be here for this public hearing too. Yeah, that's great. That's a good idea, Mark.
That'd be good. Thank you.
Great. Okay, thanks. Peggy, I hate to move things along, but Peggy, can you touch on the second item very quickly, just to let people know where that is?
Okay. So another initiative our committee's doing along with Anson. I think we've talked about the correlation between heat islands in low income neighborhoods and low canopy neighborhoods and poor health outcomes. So we may have sent you, I think, the article about what the Chesapeake Bay Foundation is doing in Richmond with Southside Richmond. They're partnering with the neighborhood association called Southside Relief to plant trees in this low canopy neighborhood. And they've been very successful. They've gotten a huge grant from, I can't remember where, maybe federal government. But there are three purposes for this grant. One, not only to plant trees, but also to just teach the community about the environment. And 3, to teach the kids about the environmental related industries, not just with trees, but landscaping, but all kinds of environmental industries, which are going to be needing people in the future. So, and again, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation was very careful to work very closely with the neighborhood. So it wasn't this, organization coming in and telling the neighborhood what to do, but really partnering with them. So Anson and I and some other people on our committee are really interested in seeing if we can't do sort of the same thing, not probably on that large a scale, but on a smaller scale in Charlottesville, and particularly in the 2 target neighborhoods of Star Hill and 10th and Page, which are under 20% canopy, which is really a kind of a crisis situation for health. So we've talked to CACF, the Community Foundation Organization. We've talked to the City of Promise, which is an organization who's targeted those 2 neighborhoods. And we've talked to the Nature Conservancy here in Charlottesville. All of them seem interested. we need some, one of our problems, of course, is the tree commission, we have a hard time planting on private property. So if we could get a grant to do more planting on private property in those neighborhoods particularly, it would go a long way. We've had great interest, as I said. We've also talked to PEC, Piedmont Environmental Organization, and Anson is a maestro in writing grants and doing data analysis. So it's a budding idea, but we seem to have gotten a lot of interest. The Nature Conservancy in particular seems to be interested because they haven't done things in inner city Charlottesville. Their organization, just like PEC, does most of their work in the rural area. But in these days and time, when we're talking about environmental justice equals social justice, these groups are sort of interested in helping inner city neighborhoods. So we're keeping our fingers crossed, but we're thinking that we're going to get some traction on this. I think a lot of us, we talk a lot, but we'd like to get some things done too, some actual, improving neighborhoods. So that's just, it's an initial idea, but we're excited that we think, we can get some traction here.
Great. Thanks, Peggy and Anson, for pushing that forward. We'll look forward to hear more about that in future meetings, coming months. Paul, I hate to disappoint you, but I think that was such a wonderful discussion and presentation. Is there any way that we can hold over the tree list? It's until next meeting, since you were going to put it up on screen, because Mike still needs time. There's budget stuff and we need to incorporate other items. Are you okay with?
Yeah, that's fine with me. I mean, there are very, very few changes, but if anyone has, if anyone wants to send comments, that's fine.
Would you send it up before the next meeting? Would you send that around to everybody? And
I did send it around.
You
I didn't
did.
highlight the changes, but I sent the tree list around. If there's any further comments, really the only changes, sorry to jump in, but the only changes really were the ginkgo moved from a medium tree to a large tree, and the sugar maple moved from a medium to a large tree, and then the honey locust dropped down to a limit usage category, but everything else, and then we also added one. Yeah, that was really it for the changes. It was very nuts and bolts. So
are people comfortable with this is actually being a second reading and that we could vote on approving the tree list right now? I think there was enough input at the last go around. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and just do that? So I wasn't sure if we had time for a presentation on screen, but we have a time for a vote. So is there a motion that we approve the master tree list as discussed and revised?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Peggy moves. Is there a second to the motion that we approve the tree list? Anson seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Signify aye. I can't see Mark, but you guys have it. So, okay, we did do that. Tim, comprehensive plan is just there again this month because I want to make sure that we don't lose track of what we need to do, what your help the committee needs. And so there's nothing really to report further now, but at some point, we need to know like what needs to get on our agenda so that whether it's the zoning ordinance, begin to work on that. So unless you have anything to say about that, I'm going to turn it to Mike.
Yeah, I think I was asked to prepare a report on like the public engagement, and the feedback from the community. So I did that. I have that from last month. I kind of updated it for this month just by changing the date. So maybe I could just send that around by email attachment and it gets appended to the next month's packet or something, but it's nothing more than just splicing stuff out of the Seville Plans Together website and the reports available on that website. So I don't have any problem skipping over that. And I think just as a matter of response to what you're saying, yeah, we just need to be prepared with, when they do the code audit and the zoning ordinance updates, it's the last of the 3 phases of this multi-phase planning process. So that's coming, but it hasn't started yet. So You're right. We need to be poised to do that, but we're not behind the curve.
Because that's going to be a pretty large effort from the codes committee, and then input from the commission. So that's a good update. All right, Mike, sorry to do this to you again. What we'll do for you, Mike, is we can push, we don't have items and announcements on the agenda. 1 or 2 comments, not a lot of action items to talk about. You and I can do that offline. So whatever public comment we'll push a little later into the meeting. So it should give you about 15 minutes. Is that enough time to talk about those 3 budget items?
You gotta turn your mute off.
You're on mute.
Yeah, I hope so. I think some of these requests are going to be similar to things that went forward before. They will be familiar to former tree commission members, but they'll be new to the new members, obviously. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Just bear with me. If someone could confirm they can see my screen.
Yep.
Okay. So just for new members, every year we make a capital improvement program submissions for for additional funding for projects to improve the community. So we'll do, like, our CIP funding is usually tree planting and things like that. But there's some other requests that have gone forward in the past. Like, for example, the mulch tree study was a CIP request. So this is not operational money per se. So removals, pruning, stump grinding, that comes out of the operating budget. So for our commissioners we had last year, you may recall a forest health improvement initiative went forward for $50,000 to help offset ash tree removals as a result of emerald ash borer. And this item was not funded last year. So it's moving forward again. Some of the language has changed a little bit at the bottom. Okay, so we had used the example before of $15,000 to remove the couple trees, 7 trees, I believe, in the crawl garden. We wanted to use a tangible example that people can see, people drive by regularly. But another example, which I think really puts it in the context, where we have some parks that have no ash trees, and we have other places like disc golf and on the Greenbrier Trail that have lots of ash trees, where there's going to be a huge impact, to some of these wooded areas. So disc golf, I had a tree issue came up, and they wanted some dead trees removed. So I walked down there, and it would be things like, it'd be a clump of ash trees. It'd be like 5 large ash trees, and there would be 3 of them would be dead with emerald ash borer. So for me, it makes sense if I have the tree crew here and I have 5 ash trees that aren't treated that will eventually die. It makes sense, financially, to remove all the trees at the same time. But then I started walking the entire disc golf course and just counting just to get a rough estimate of how many ash trees are on disc golf and how many we're really going to need to deal with. I counted 170 trees. So I think it helps raise the alarm that like somewhere like disc golf is going to have a tremendous impact on the budget. How do we do that without CIP funding? So, so I've added sort of some of that language, and I'm debating whether changing the name of it from the Forest Health Improvement Initiative to something a little more urgent. But this is, similar request that is going forward again. Are there any comments, questions about that?
So this, I just have a question. Is there a way that you could put like a per tree number on this list, like an average, for a 20-inch caliper tree, or, something, an average tree size that would be removed? Just so someone could do the math for like 170 trees, not that you would take out 170, but it gives, I think you do it pretty well. But 6 ash trees cost $15,000, but I think having a per tree number might be also pretty compelling. It's hard to say because every tree is different. If it's a dead tree, it's more expensive to take down than a live tree, or It's like
Right.
you can climb a dead tree, but I don't know. Is somehow like the urgency needs to be, or would you even want to state that like that a dead tree is, if we wait for these trees to die, they'll cost 30% more to remove because once they're fully dead, you can't climb them. Or I don't know. Is that any of that language make any sense?
It would definitely be very hard to put a dollar amount and say, this is how much it costs to remove a 23, because the biggest factor in removing a tree is going to be location. And it just varies so much. I think that would be hard to do. I can tell you that, what we removed for ash trees last year is very nominal, but I have more and more that keep coming up this year. And I can tell you we've doubled easily what was spent last year for ash tree removal.
Are all these points in the open data set? Just quick question.
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Yes, these are. But like I had one this week. It was it's not in the data. It was in right of way where you wouldn't assume that it was city property. But if you did a survey and locate the corners, that it's a large ash tree and it's on city property.
Mike, I just wondered if you might want to say, the thing about these ash is they're dying once they start dying, they die on very quickly, and they're brittle and they're dangerous, because and I just wonder if you ought to put, it's sort of like it's a crisis situation. You can't, a lot of people say, well, leave dead trees because they're great for wildlife. But in this case, the ash are so brittle that they're dangerous. They're falling.
To echo that, I'd put public safety somewhere in there, front and center.
Yeah. I think public safety, look along the Rivanna Trail. There's so many ash there and they're falling. As I'm sure you know, Mike. And it just seems like it's a really dangerous situation.
Yeah, I think those are good comments. I think.
Mike, I think it's also important, as Paul said, I think, that the cost while you're in there to add the ones that are alive that are gonna die is gonna be significantly less if they don't have to crane them out of there, because they can climb them and take them down.
Yeah, and I wonder if the title of this is something along the lines of, failure liability prevention or something like that. Ash liability prevention, or I don't know. Somehow get the word liability, hazard, and ash in a statement that sort of lets them know the seriousness of this.
Okay, those are all good. Excellent. I know Mike has 2 more items. And by the way, Mike, before we get to those 2, at what stage are we at? If there's additional comment after the meeting from commissioners, we're still early in this. We're just so everybody knows, we're early in the CIP process, correct?
We are, and I'm still waiting for direction on CIP timeline. And once I have that, I will share it with you. But it has been a very strange year for CIP process.
Okay, so this is not the last time we look at this, just so the rest of the commission knows.
Right. All right. Okay. This one last thing I would like to say about the CIP money to remove ash trees. I put a line in there about some place like disc golf there's all those ash trees are going to be removed. The sooner we can get them out and deal with emerald ash borer, the sooner we can come back and put trees back in that are sustainable. And I think, that's kind of the whole point. But I tried to tie it all in together to the urban forest, the health of the urban forest, and I did that again I'll show you in the planting money request. So this, you all recall, this went forward with the mall tree study. This is the downtown mall trees active life cycle management plan, and then so this was money to help with the downtown mall trees, cutting tree grades, treating them for scale, and also it was Brian Daly had the idea that we would, if we didn't use $100,000 every year, we'd save that money until we had enough substantial where we could replace an entire block or whatever the mall tree study, suggested. So that this went forward with that study, and council came back and said, well, we're not going to give you money for the life cycle management without a plan, which was fair. But now I'm hopeful that we can get a mall tree study finished. And so I would like to pose this again, because I'm hoping we can get the study done and then have funding to implement.
Yeah, this one I'm not really sold on this one, only because that study, I know that if you look at the city of Greenville, which did their mall tree study essentially, and it was, it was actually more like $1 million a year they were investing in each block. So I don't know if these numbers are really accurate to a real plan. If the cost of actually taking up pavers and redoing and removing trees, for a real, whatever the proposed mall plan is, I think those numbers could be much higher than this. And I think this seems a little too early, in my opinion.
Mike, how will you answer? I mean, isn't this, they're going to ask the same question? You haven't done the Mall Street study, so how do you know? I think you have to put some rationale in there or something, and maybe some specifics too. I mean, it seems to me the more detailed you can be. I mean, for instance, if you did have to remove a block of trees, I think they have to understand what the cost, because it's not just, it's expensive to take the tree down, then there's going to be pavement, and there's going to be a new way to plant the tree. And what does it cost to replace one of those trees? It's very expensive, I know. But I think if you're going to do it, I think you have to be a little more specific and make some rationale. I mean, I don't know. I'm a little concerned they'll ask the same question. You haven't done the study, so how are you going to know?
Okay.
I don't know.
My point was going to be that, well, we're working on the study, but we need to have funding in place, to implement.
Study's done. Yeah.
Even if it's not sufficient, funding, at least we have something to start with, just the active life cycle management.
Can we build sort of a inflation factor into each of those years, so that, I mean, you could make the argument that, well, in the initial period after the study, we're not taking out 3 pods,
Right.
but there's a certain amount of money that we will need to begin that work, and we'd like to get that in the pipeline. But I think maybe this is not a great strategy, but I think those FY23 forwards should really reflect like much higher levels, and so to signal that this is going to be a big project.
Yeah, and the fact that there's no design fees in there either also is a red flag. Like, would this just be all out of Parks and Rec's pocket the entire time, for this?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'd have to look at that. This was, again, this is a lot that Brian Daly put forward.
Yeah.
I understand you want to start thinking about this and put this before them, and if we can sort of work with you and figure out a way to do that. But to the extent that we need your time and resources and others to get the mall study off the ground, I mean, I think that should be.
Okay. So I'm hearing some good comments, and I'm also hearing that this is probably premature. So is this something that the tree commission wants to propose, or is this too soon?
I wasn't hearing that it was premature, but there were definitely concerns that it's maybe not enough. And I was wondering if maybe the description should just put this overall number in some kind of context, or a lot of times there's a range. When I think Paul just mentioned Greenville, $1 million a block. I mean, this is probably, maybe there's a way to sort of say, the overall cost of the whole downtown mall of tree related work, is somewhere between 300,000 and 5 million. I don't know what the upper end is, but the upper end, I agree, the upper end is probably way higher than this, especially if it gets into the whole cultural landscape, and are they in the same location, and are we ripping out, an entire block? And part of the reason for the study is to find the cost effectiveness factor part of this. But
But
I think-
I want to be a little optimistic here, and I'm going to take Peggy's position on this, that we will have a mall tree study concluded
Yeah.
by some point in FY22. It would be nice if we had some resources, some line item that we could start doing something.
Well,
So
yeah, I mean, I guess if you just, emphasize that this is, I mean, I almost would say put 250,000 in a phase one, or 200,000 in a phase one. That is sort of, okay, that you finish the study and you can right away start on phase one.
Yeah.
And then you just have, money that you're starting to put aside for the future years that is not actually, it's just money that you're putting aside that you realize that there is future work, but it's maybe much more than this.
And I think this is a good way of communicating to city council and to everybody else that this is going to be a significant investment. That they need to, people should be thinking about it now. But I don't think, again, Mike, I think the point is these numbers need to be much higher.
Well,
Yeah, and then add design fees in there too, if that consultant continues on.
I am concerned about council has lots of other priorities. And, last year they gave parks 000 approximately for the CIP. And I'm just worried about if we ask for too much, it's just going to be a red line striked out. I mean, I think we've got to somehow justify what would be a reasonable amount to begin with. And I just worry about, it's not going to be a high priority. I don't know.
Without the report done, it's
Greenville,
hard to argue, yeah.
I'd like to look and see what Greenville really, it's $1 million a block. I mean, I'm not sure what that means, but I'm just worried. Let's get going on it, but let's don't scare council.
There would be some other, Ithaca, New York, for example, also has a pedestrian mall. Would be maybe a good, they did a complete redevelopment, not just trees. But I know from experience that their renovations were in 3 phases over almost like 6 years. Definitely, I wonder to what extent would like the actual physical mall here in Charlottesville be repaired or replaced in addition to just the trees themselves. And I wonder if that's been considered in the overall cost also.
Yeah, so.
The city has done a lot of that work.
What's that?
The city has already done a lot of work on the pavement.
Right. Yeah, so for example, to remove a tree or remove an entire block and replant is going to be, it's very invasive to answer your question. So yes.
Maybe it helps in this case, Paul had said this about the ash trees, but on a per tree basis, just to have in here, by the way, there are X number of trees on the downtown mall, and just doing, a particular task of pruning for safety on, 50% of them, costs X. Just give them, make sure that the sort of scale of it is clear, and that might help make the number clearer, because I think they probably just don't understand what goes into sort of staging, and maintaining a single tree.
But I also worry without the report, if somebody sees it and say, what are we, so we're going to remove trees, we're putting money in the budget to remove trees or to change them all, or, it's the third rail already. I don't know.
So I think in the interest of moving forward, I think we obviously need to think about this further. So we're not making a decision tonight. But I think we need to think about this more, Mike, and get you some feedback. And because I know you have one more item. We're at 9 minutes before we end this meeting, and we still need some time for any public comment. So I'm going to let you go with that final.
So the last one, the one you're most familiar with probably is the citywide tree planting. And this is very similar to what Brian Daly put forward last year. We asked for 75,000. Had originally gotten 50, and then because as a result of the pandemic, that was pulled. So we had leftover money from last year we could use. So again, putting forward 75,000. And I think it's even more important next year because I certainly have plenty of planting locations, and I expect to, come next year. So in order to play catch up, I think it's kind of critical.
Yeah, especially because you're not planting this year.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're playing catch up. So your number in there for 75,000, how much are you saying it is per tree?
I think, what would we say, 350 a tree?
And do you think that's the going rate based on the last one? Because I feel like it was like 350 or 400. I feel like it just, they keep going up a little bit. 2-inch caliper, balled and burlap tree installed. I don't know.
It was 350 last year. So I changed, Brian Dale had 24 months. I changed it to 48 months. The past 2 years have been similar. They've been about 350.
Okay.
And I put some language down here. If say we did get funding to remove emerald ash for trees at some place like Disc Golf or Greenbrier Trail, or otherwise where we're removing ash trees, we're going to need money obviously to replant. So I'm just kind of again trying to tie the whole thing together as the health of the urban forest. Are there any questions or comments with the tree planting?
Yeah, the only question is, would that first year want to be bigger than, would you want to actually show instead of 75,000 in the first year, you show 150,000 and then you drop it after that?
We can change that.
I mean, just to make up for lost trees. And then when they nickel and dime us and say, let's drop it to, 50, we say, anyway, they always drop it. It's just rarely do they ever accept it. We asked 100,000 last year and they gave us 75. It's like, I don't know.
We can change it. Is that something the commission wants to do? Ask for 150 instead of 75?
Because we didn't get so we didn't get 50. We got 0 last year.
Yeah.
Well, we initially got 75 and then they dropped it to 0. Yeah.
Right. Maybe just ask for 100. I don't know. Whatever.
I think we asked for 100 last year and we got 75.
Then we got nothing.
Well, then we got nothing. Yeah, but I don't know. I just, if Mike, you feel like we have the room for planting 400 trees, then let's target 400 trees. But if we don't have the capacity or the room or the maintenance bodies to water, et cetera, then just, go with, maybe a little bit more than average. I don't know. Whatever. What do you think you have the capacity to do? That should be our goal.
Well, I think about 200 trees would be our capacity. So actually last year we asked for 75 and then we had originally been given 50. And then that was the pandemic.
And they bumped it back up. Okay. All right.
That's taken away. So 75,000 is really what we can do if it was given to us with the resources and water and maintenance and things.
In the future, then, does the 100,000 precipitate a new employee?
Yeah, I think that's in there as well to help with plant watering.
Okay. So the consensus is to stay with 75. We need to go to public comment.
That's okay by me.
We can talk about it next time too. Yeah,
we've got opportunity. All right, this is a good first look. All right, thanks, Mike. Again, sorry to rush you through this part of it, but maybe next time we'll reverse the agenda and put you at the beginning so you don't get this. Anson, do we have anybody, any public comment, any hands raised? Anybody want to
man.
ask a question?
All quiet on the internet front, I think.
Question or comment?
We got, hold on.
Here's
I
Roxanne.
knew she was there.
There we go.
I'm here. I hate to take your valuable time. I just had 2 comments. One comment was just that for the community or somebody who wants to participate or listen to the meeting, all the material is not available to the public. There's an agenda, but the material is not there. And several of the other committee meetings do have their material up. It was not up for the tree commission. So I don't know whether that's in the clerk's office or whether that's something, Mike does and who does it, but the material's not up there for people to look at before the meeting.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. Thank you.
Yeah,
for pointing that out.
yeah.
Thank you.
The other thing, I just wanted to mention, we're talking about, I thought the Crystal's report, the Greenprint report sounds just fantastic with certainly what she was calling a library of information and data that everybody could use. I guess I was talking about how this is going to get implemented. I just want to comment of having been on a staff side and having been on a community side that, council and the politics of getting things moved through getting funding and actually getting implemented often the time is responds to community input, not necessarily what staff puts out there. So, you make the best plan and implementation plan, but that's the whole point, I think, of the committee advocacy committee is to make sure that this becomes a public issue and a community issue, because items like all the emphasis on housing, it really comes this pressure, and that's trying to create one voice for green infrastructure, trying to get a strong community push, I think is something that's really critical to get these things done. I mean, staff can lay out a lot of great plans, but you really got to get the community to show up at city council meetings and write letters and emails if you really want to push things through. So that's just my only comment.
Can I respond to that quickly, Brian? I forgot to say that Roxanne and I are participating in Piedmont Environmental Council has a conservation roundtable, which meets by Zoom once a month, and involves groups across the community that are interested in green infrastructure, climate change, conservation of natural resources, and Roxanne and I are participating in that, and that's an effort to get a coalition when issues come up that people are concerned about the environment, climate change, trees, parks, whatever, can speak up. And I think it's been instrumental because the 3 C's, the climate, community,
Collaborative.
also collaborative, and us, the Tree Commission, have been vocal at the previous strategic plan meeting that City Council had. So, so anyway, I just want to repeat what Roxanne said, that we are trying to create this coalition of people who care about these issues. And so that's ongoing. And I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you both for doing that. Thank you, Roxanne, and for your comments. We are at the 7:30 hour. And so in fairness to all, I want to thank everybody participating, everybody in the public and viewing. And the meeting is adjourned. December 1st is our next meeting. Thank you all.
Thanks, Brian. See y'all.
Bye-bye.
Good to see you.